I'm going to speak to you today about climate science, the true, the not so true, and how to use it. My main areas have been in Kenya, Zambia, Malawi, Ethiopia, and Uganda. So in relation to what is true about climate information services, it's first of all important to say that in this presentation, I'll be speaking about implementation. How do climate information services, how are they realised at the very local level, particularly by local government and by smallholders, livestock herders and people like that. In my experience, it breaks down into three different types of products. You have the base seasonal forecast, which is probabilistic tercel forecast. Very often there are season onset and offset qualities to these forecasts. So that's provided within a degree of certainty, the start date of the season and the end date of the season, which is becoming incredibly important with shifting seasons. But probably the most important product being distributed in sub-Saharan Africa in particular is the Seasonal Livelihood Advisory, and that is going to be the main focus of this discussion. So in relation to what is true about climate information services, I'm going to say here, climate information services does improve government planning. It improves government planning in various ways. It enables planners to allocate budgets, to coordinate government personnel, and to move resources around localities. I think that these particular products are useful for local government planning because you have this co-production. You have this co-production in the knowledge. You have the local representative who comes to the local forums, they explain the information, and the information is then taken by the end users, in this case the sectoral ministries, whether it be livestock, agriculture, DRR or whatever, and then they develop a common understanding about what this information means. And from there, they can develop meaningful, useful products. In relation to downscale forecasts at the community level, climate information can be converted into understandable livelihood advice, but according to the context. But a big question often is around what are your agroecological zones within your administration area? How do they vary? And then how do you make recommendations, broad recommendations? And this is a useful product in the sense that it is understandable for people. It is a product which gives clear guidance about what to do with the approaching season. You know, you're going to plant more maize, or you're going to plant more sorghum and millet, or are you going to switch livelihoods? Are you going to move into less climate sensitive livelihoods? So another area which strikes me as that is true about climate information services, which we haven't referred to here, relates to monitoring and evaluation, which is an interest of mine, but it feeds directly into policy, so I think it's important to discuss. It is very difficult, or I would actually say impossible, to evaluate climate adaptation or resilience programs without climate information, without some kind of understanding about the shock in which people are experiencing. It is very, very challenging indeed. Climate information provides a way to establish what type of variability it is that people are experiencing. And then you have to understand the type of vulnerabilities that people have, and then bring together the physical science with the socioeconomic vulnerability to understand what are the key thresholds whereby normal variability becomes hazardous for a particular development outcome, which is very important because every development outcome has a different threshold in relation to different climate hazards. It's very, very difficult to provide prescriptive advice to policymakers without a clear understanding about how that interaction happens. Now, in my experience, that cannot happen without climate information services. What you often find is that there's a lot of work on perspectives of people on the ground, or a lot of work around just base socioeconomic characteristics. They need to be understood as an interaction. Once you have an idea about this interaction, then the information can feed into prescriptive advice for policymakers. One challenge there has been is around learning, around CIS. There's been many, many programs around learning. And when I talk about learning here, I'm not talking about local government. Instead, what I'm saying is that smallholders, livestock herders, people with the most acute vulnerability, people that have the most climate-sensitive livelihoods, they struggle to learn about how to use climate information services. And it's a big challenge because they work more in times of physical experience that they've had in the past, and they don't think so well in terms of abstract concepts, which really are kind of important to understand, probabilities and uncertainty. A big piece of work which has been funded by DFID is the PIXA project headed by Peter Dorwood in Reading, which very much gets down and looks into how you would begin to get smallholders or people at the community level to work with the data to try and understand, well, okay, I have a range of livelihood activities. In what way are they climate sensitive? To what types of hazards? And what can I do about it? This is very, very important work for the future, because I think when all's said and done, climate information may be all that everyone is left with in 30 or 40 years' time. That's the learning component. Around advisories, as I said, they're an incredibly important component of the range of products. But at the same time, the advisories create instances whereby you have a probabilistic forecast. It is communicated in narrative form. Therefore, the probabilistic information is not adequately conveyed, and people do not understand the uncertainties within the information. When you have a 1 in 3 chance of the information being fundamentally wrong, for example, saying normal to above normal actually being below normal rainfall, for example, then people lose faith in the forecast. And it makes it very, very difficult to bring people along when you're conveying this type of information and that information has been consistently wrong. The other component is that it stifles learning. It doesn't enable people to grasp the characteristics of the information, the true dynamics of the information that is being given to them, and how they can use it. My suggestion to move forward at this very, very local level is to carry on with PIXA, because I know Peter Dorwood well, and we've engaged in the past on various bits and pieces. What I would say is that what Peter has provided is an incredibly important qualitative indicator. It's saying to people, you have this range of livelihood options. You develop like a livelihood map. It's giving you a qualitative indicator. It's saying more of this and less of this, which is incredibly important. But the characteristics of the information that people receive is set within very particular boundaries. What I would say is you need to use those percentages when you are staggering livelihood strategies so they can reflect what we would understand as a risk management strategy. I've tried this type of work in Zambia in relation to climate resilient cropping strategies. It's very challenging, but I think that is a way to move forward when working with the poor and vulnerable in LDCs.